Good afternoon, everybody. It's me again. Welcome to the Carolina Geek Podcast. And on this episode, I'm going to take a little bit of a different detour, as I really didn't have a subject I was going to do today, but I just wanted to put one on here just so that you folks knew I was still alive and well. Many of you may know, many of you may not know, that I'm actually a published author, and the fact that I've only published one book. It was self-published, but it is on Amazon. And you can find it on both the Amazon bookstore and on Kindle. And it's called Through the Hourglass. It's made by myself. The name is John Thomas Hill. The paperback is $18, which is a lot, but it's a bigger book than normal paperback. It's about 5 by 8 size, and it's over 600 pages. Close to 700 pages of a novel, and so you're getting your money's worth. But if you want to just read it on your Kindle, you can pick it up for $3. And occasionally I'll run sales. I need to run another sale. It's been a while, but I may run another sale here shortly where you can pick it up for like 99 cents or something like that, or maybe free, depending on how. I don't make any money off it. That it's a hobby. And I want to talk about the challenges I faced in writing this book. The original idea came about 15 years ago when I was still doing LiveJournal, and they had a writing community I think it was called Down the Rabbit Hole, which on January 26th, I think it's something like that, where Allison went through the looking glass, and it was a challenge, and I thought, instead of a mirror, what about if somebody went through an hourglass through time? Thus the title, Through the Hourglass. And instead of the character would go in time, and it's basically a personalization of myself. I did change a few things around to where if you didn't know me personally, you would not automatically suggest it would be a Mary Sue kind of character, but it's one of those things. It's a personification of me, but I put enough things in there, I hope I did, to where it's not exactly me, And the main impetus of the story was to transform this very rural area in western North Carolina, where I'm used to living at, and in 500 years turn it into a metropolis that would make Blade Runner look like a small town, and which it did. It took 7 years to write. During that time, I lost my mom, I lost my aunt. I moved once during that time, and I changed jobs. I went from working at Walmart to no longer working at... Well, I think I left Walmart. I think the book came out before I left Walmart. So, yeah, it was a situation where I was very busy at times. I was working at times 2 jobs plus taking care of my aunt, so I didn't really have much time to write it. And actually, I kind of finished it up in 2012 as part of a writing challenge to myself to finally get the thing done, and I managed to do it, and it was like majorly longer than I ever thought it was going to be. And it looks like the second one will be just as long, because it's 82 pages right now, and I've not even begun to get into the bulk of the storyline, what I want to get into. So I need to pare it down, I know, but it's one of those things. And creating universe, even if it's on a planet, even if it's just a town, it's complicated. You've got to create characters, you've got to create scenes, you've got to create history, you've got to do all this. And science fiction is one of those things where there are no rules, which is a good and sometimes a bad thing. In this story, I'm taking a collection of towns and pulling them 500 years in the future and completely radically changing them dramatically. to where they're unrecognizable 500 years in the future. So essentially, except for some roads that are recognizable, it's basically a blank slate almost. For the locals, I throw in some locations to where certain things are, like the New Vatican, which left the old Vatican because of a war in Europe that saw the Catholic Church become extremely unpopular in Italy, and they left to come to a country formerly known as the United States. What did he say? Formerly known as the United States? Buy the book, you'll find out. And the country is now Republic of Carolina. It actually takes, after the result of a huge, gigantic war, just a few years after the main character disappears, United States collapses, and the states are basically on their own for a while, and then North and South Carolina get together, they build things, other states join them up, and the next thing you know, within a couple of generations, it goes all the way from the top of Canada all the way down to the Panama Canal, to Panama. And the war essentially creates this blank slate and also gives me the opportunity to kill a lot of people. It is actually a Second American War and a Third World War that kills 4 billion people in the space of 2 years. And then in the immediate aftermath, because so much has been wrecked, 2 billion more people die in roughly the 5 years before civilization starts to come back again and things start to renew. So you basically there's roughly 8 billion people in the world right now, or maybe not quite that much. Let me check. Hey Alexa, how many people are in the world right now?
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the world population today is approximately 7.68 billion.
So it's $7.68 billion. By the way, don't you just love it, Alexa? So yeah, you've got 7.6 billion people in the world, and I kill 6 billion of them. So there's 1.6 billion people, which means A, there's a lot of room. B, a lot of regions are completely devastated, like the Middle East. A lot of the hot spots are devastated. India and all this, they get not a whole lot of people are left living there. And there's a reason for that, because there's a major cultural evolution that takes place after the war happens, and you'll find out more about it in the book if you buy it, and I hope you do. But the challenge of writing this book was immense, because it was not just a stranger in a strange land, it was also a backstory of why this character was pulled into the future. It wasn't, I'm going to drop a spoiler here, it wasn't by accident that he was pulled into the future. There's a reason he was pulled into the future. And I'm going to drop more of that information in the second book. That's why I'm kind of having issues with it, because I'm trying to figure out where to take this character all the way to. So, yeah. Writing the book, basically here and there, in all of that time, I did other stuff. I wrote a short story called Abandon, which was a short story you can find on fiction.net, I think it is, or FictionNet, or whatever it is. It's also on, Wattpad. And I may have published it on Medium. I can't remember. I don't think I published it on Medium yet, but I really need to. It was a really nice... I need to go back and expand that story and make it a full-blown novel. Basically, the premise is, guy goes down to his basement, going to watch a football game. He falls asleep. He wakes up. Everybody's disappeared. Or almost everybody has disappeared. And it's not a rapture thing. It's, he thinks the rapture's happened and he's screwed, but in fact, it's something totally different. And he's going around trying to find out if he can find anybody. So yeah. But it's one of those things I talk about, because I've got a lot of ideas. It's just the fact that it's hard to really, when you have expectations and you have a temptation to write a big story, and I've done short stories that have gone a lot longer than a short story. I've practically done novellas back when I was a kid. If I had a word processor back when I was a kid, that's probably what all I would have done would have been writing. But back in the Stone Age, we didn't, or at least we had a typewriter, but my granddad it was an El Cheapo typewriter, and you couldn't go back and fix your words. If you've ever seen me type, I am the fastest hunt and peck typist you'll ever see, and I'm the fastest correction typist you'll ever see, because I write right off the top of my head. So it's difficult. Plot structure, I have goalposts that I meet. There's the beginning of the story, kind of the middle where the X crosses. Like if you know about how traditional theater is run, there's the X where one character's heights go from down to up, and then there's the one character that goes from up to down. And with my book, it's much more complicated than that, because the main character is going through a really crazy time. He's a fish out of water. He's basically, it's like bringing somebody from the 1500s to today. Oh, how do you explain the pandemic and the fact that you can communicate with people halfway around the world instantaneously? And the fact that there is such a thing as halfway around the world. Oh, you can go to Mars now, and you can walk on the surface. Ooh, drop spoilers. There's a lot to it, and I am constantly. And it's one of the things. The good thing about the science fiction is there's no boundaries. The bad thing about science fiction, there's no boundaries. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of deal. But if you go into writing and you're unsure, if you also have wanted to do fan fiction, I highly suggest you try that out first. The fact is, my first original novel is not the first novel I've ever actually wrote. I've actually written 2 fan fiction novels that you can find on fanfiction.net under my old pen name, Jason Bond, which is an old college radio show name I used to have. And one, Crossing Lines, incorporates an old show called Star Blazers, back from around the 1980 year. It also incorporates Babylon 5 and Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. It was part of 100 chapters in a 100-day challenge, which I met. And it clocked in at something like 100 some odd thousand words, 120,000 words I think it was, maybe longer than that. No, I take that back, it may be shorter than that. I think my second one, which is 13, was 140,000. I think the first one was like 85,000 words. I'd have to check. But it was a big novel. It was sort of big, and my second novel, which is called 13, which incorporates a story from Babylon 5 and Battlestar Galactica, crossing over, which a lot of folks tend to like. Some don't, because they fail to take the very first paragraph I put on there, which sets the stage. It was written as the show was running, as Battlestar Galactica was running. So things that happened later in the show didn't happen in the novel because things change. Oh, these people from Babylon 5 come along. So if you want to do fan fiction to kind of help spark your creative juices, I highly recommend it. It's a good thing to do because it gives you the opportunity to really enjoy the experience. It's not easy to write, I can tell you that much. I personally would recommend that if you do it for your enjoyment. Do it as a story that you're going to enjoy writing. Because I feel like if you enjoy the writing part, more often than not, the readers are going to enjoy the reading part. Not everybody is going to get your story. A lot of folks won't get my story. But you're learning the process. If you want to be serious about it, going into making a career, that's when you start looking at the market and what kind of markets you want to put your work into. But truth be told, this is something I'm doing and I'm learning because somewhere down the road, I'm going to retire either voluntarily or involuntarily, and I need to make money. So this is one part of it, is the writing part. And I want to, if heaven forbid something were to happen to where I couldn't work anymore, I could still have a way to make a living in some case or at least make some extra money. You know, that I think is very important, to say the least. I do want to let you know that writing is fun, but it's also very challenging. It's very frustrating at times. Pace yourself. Don't be afraid to stop on a project and go do something else. And you know, unless you're good enough in your mind to actually give a go of trying to become a professional writer, just enjoy it. Okay, just enjoy it. That's what I do. And try to do some nonfiction writing. That'll help. Try to stretch your boundaries to a certain extent. I think that'll definitely help too. But don't think that you have to have the greatest novel of all time in your mind. You can have a novel that you think in your mind is great, but other people may not like. Write it anyway. You might be surprised. Some people might actually like it. I just wanted to come on here to talk about my novel a bit and basically throw some content on there. I'm still evolving this podcasting thing. This is the one thing I'm planning on doing is build it to where I can do some stuff to where I can do some podcasting, do some nonfiction writing, and do some fiction writing, and be able to make some money that way. And I'm trying to figure out what exactly I want to go into podcasting-wise. So that's why I have 4 different podcasts, because I'm trying 4 different things to see how they go. One is basically a general personal podcast where I talk about whatever I want to talk about. Then I got I guess you'd call it political podcast with some hard news and such, basically. It's called Middle of the Road Podcast. I have this geek podcast called Carolina Geek Podcast. Then I've got the Rutherford Sports Network podcast, which originated all of this, which basically is talking about sports all the time. So, yeah, there is that. So that's sort of the long-term project I have, is determining what markets I want to get into, what things I want to do, whether it's podcasting, whether it's article writing, whatnot, producing web content and selling it. That is something I'm exploring right now, and a lot of it's in the geek field, but there's a lot of stuff in the geek stuff that I'm not necessarily a fan of. But sometimes you have to write things that you're not necessarily a fan of, and that can be tough sometimes, because I'll be honest with you, I don't really care much for the Marvel or DC universes, either one. If you want to get real, I don't. So yeah. Anyhow, I wanted to come on here to talk about that. And I'm going to be off tomorrow. I'll probably put some more podcasts up then. And I may talk more about the future of these podcasts and kind of give you an idea of where I want to go with all this. So, and I need to do the one I talked about the previous podcast, which is, in my opinion, Star Wars is not science fiction. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I consider it more fantasy than sci-fi. It's a fantasy basically in space. It's basically, in a way, Lord of the Rings in space. Now, is Star Wars as good as Lord of the Rings? That's debatable. Especially for those who consider the prequel and the sequels not as good as the original trilogy. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm more of a casual fan than anything else of Star Wars, so I don't really get into the whole... I haven't read all the books. I haven't watched all the specials. I've watched all 9 films. I've enjoyed all 9 films for the most part. Episode 2 wasn't that great. Episode 3 was better. Episode 1 was good. 4, 5, and 6 are classic. 7, 8, and 9 are good on their own. Although I think 9 tried to do too much. What they really should have done, in my honest opinion, was split it into 2. Like the end of the Hunger Games. Split the final episode of the trilogy into 2 movies. And I think they would have accomplished that. So, that is it for now. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.